I checked a weather app on the rain radar, and it reassured me and told me that it's not raining here. So everything's okay. So if I pull it, so like a radar, I think you can see like the rain, and there's no rain here. I'm like, okay, this. I need a new app, I think, while I'm here to find the weather. All right, so let's look at here a monetary policy chart. So 25% basis point, 25 basis points to a 1/4 percentage point drop in the nominal interest rate, RTN. And we want to compare this to a baseline case where we fix this external finance group, so we shut down the ability for us to have this feedback effect. We can do that by controlling this S or this psi function, or they're inversely related. And so what do we see? We have this drop to the nominal interest rate. This leads to an increase in output, an increase in investment. Now, if we hold the premium constant, or here we call it the premium constant, right? Then we can also get an increase in investment. What does this mean? If we have this boost in output, this is going to be increasing our net worth. Right? That is going to push down external finance premium. So this is relative to the baseline level. So if we have, like if you have to pay, the premium is this positive difference. So this is the risk-free rate that depositors get, or that the bank in its outside option. And this is the, right, what we have to pay to borrow from the bank as entrepreneurs. If this premium goes down, right, if this negative here means that it's gone down, which means the surplus that we have to pay is less. This is going to increase our demand for capital goods, increase our investment. This investment goes into output. Increase output, increase our net worth. Right, so the premium is down even further. And the final point where this lens ends up is what we see in the black line here. Right? And how large is this effect? So we have a 25 basis point drop in the nominal interest rate, gives us a 20 basis point drop in the external finance premium. Right? And this leads then to output that is nearly or roughly twice as large as it was before. We had a positive increase of about 0.7, and now it's nearly 1.5 percentage points, 1.5% higher than before. Investment also likewise almost doubled. Oh, about 50%. Yeah, okay. So this one is almost. Now I should probably just call this like almost 1. So then it's about 50% increase in output and almost 100% increase in investment. And now the persistence. Can we say something about the persistence here? Right? It's this boost. Once we have this accumulated this net worth, that's now the importance of this accumulation of capital and net worth. It's not, as I said, things move too quickly. In the original Keynesian model, it's all forward-looking and they adjust instantaneously. Here, if we have an increase in our net wealth, it builds up slowly, and then it takes a while for it to diminish down. In other words, imagine someone like Elon Musk. He can do lots of really silly things. Like we've seen him do lots of silly things in the past year or so, and he still has a very high net worth. Right? He'd have to do a lot of silly things for a very long time to drive down his net worth here, right? So this is what's going to give us then the increase in the persistence, because our net worth is only going to slowly revert back to its initial level, right? And so this external finance premium, we see the effect here. So look at compared to without the financial accelerator, the nominal interest rate is essentially back 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. It's essentially back then to its initial level, 12 quarters after the shock, so 3 years after the shock. But we see that output is still elevated. Investment is still elevated. Why? Because this premium is still significantly, right? It's only lost about half of its change, right? The reason why it takes so long to go back down is, right, it's a premium that depends on our net worth. The higher is our net worth, right, the lower is this premium. So with our net worth being higher, being sticky or not sticky, being sluggish, it's been accumulated, gives us then here a prolonged effect of external finance premium. Right, so this has been, not only have we shown in the baseline of the Keynesian model that a policy shock, a monetary policy shock can have real effects, we can now see we can even have real effects even after this original shock has died out. In other words, there's no effect left on the nominal interest rate. Right? It's back essentially to its equilibrium level, and it's going to stay there. But nonetheless, because it pushed us out of equilibrium, and it takes us a while to get back, right, we're just going to have a prolonged effect. Right, so have you ever pushed a shopping cart or some cart or some tray where you have a lot of heavy things on it, and it's got momentum. So when you start pushing it, and you want to stop it, it's kind of hard to stop it, right? It's hard to steer. And it's a lot different than when you, like this thing here, I can just, twirl around and it's super easy. If like we had 3 people sitting on this, once you start moving, it's hard to stop. It's got momentum. And that's what we get in a model when we have these laws of motion, these state variables. Capital has momentum. Even after investment has returned to some initial level, if our capital stock is higher than where it originally began, it has to slowly depreciate back to this original level. Yeah? So it takes a while. Once we have this momentum going, it's going to take a while for that to come back to rest. And the same thing holds true in our net worth. With our net worth. All right, if we look at that output, we compare now 3 different shocks. Our technology shock, we have an increase about maybe 30%. Right? So 1/3 of a larger effect of the financial accelerator. A demand shock, so we've got expenditure shock. So also again about 30%, 1/3, 40% larger. Our wealth shock, this shouldn't be surprising. An increase of wealth does very little without a financial accelerator, and that's exactly the margin, right, through measures of wealth and net worth, where this accelerator is going to be most effective. Right, so you can then also and we see the persistence, essentially basically that we have this large difference persists even years out after this initial shock. Right, the wealth shock, this is a positive shock to our entrepreneur's wealth. Right, so I think we just increase their net worth, their wealth, by about 1%. Right, this induces a similar positive feedback loop. They have higher net worth, they can borrow more, so they demand more capital, they invest more, and this boosts output. So the total effect on entrepreneurs' wealth exceeds 2%, and output rises by about 1%. Yeah, close. Right, so I mean, this is also where you can get to some questionable conclusions. So this tells us that we give entrepreneurs more wealth, right? This can generate a trickle-down sort of supply-side effect for the rest of the economy. So imagine, right, so the question is then, where did this initial 1% increase in initial wealth come from? If we do this, this redistribution from households to entrepreneurs, right, so a decrease in household wealth, right, this is telling us in the end we'll be better off. In terms of output, this will give us a large boost in production. What it's not telling us here is who gets this production, right? So if we tax our normal households and reduce their wealth by half of a percentage point, they're worse off. We end up increasing our entrepreneurs' wealth by 2%, they're a lot better off. And now the question is, does this initial decrease in household wealth, does this eventually later get compensated for by this increase in output? Because now we have more production, so we have to hire more labor, right? So we have more job creation, is the term that some people use. That's a question we can't see from these panels, but something that we can take a look at together in a minute on the computer. Right, but so the point that we have here is that if we have these credit market effects, then these large changes in entrepreneurial wealth and net worth can be important sources of business cycle fluctuations. Right? This is also sort of a motivation for why we see in financial crises there's a lot of concern to stabilize the financial markets. Right? You could cynically say that this is favoritism by policymakers. They want to save and subsidize the banks and financial markets, and that might be part of the story. But another part of the story tells us that small changes here can have large consequences for the real economy as a whole. Okay. So we're done with the content and material of the course here. Yeah. Yeah. So what things do we have left to do? I want to look at the exam, the practical exam with you. We'll do that tomorrow. So if you haven't had time yet, please just take a little bit of time tonight and put a practice exam up on there. Try some things out so that you can have some questions like, wow, I don't know how much to write, how little to write. I thought about writing this or that, or this is the time to do that. And we'll look at problem set, and now let's look at MATLAB and see we have a file here, BGG1. And we have a shock to monetary policy. We have a shock technology, we have a shock to government expenditures or demand shock, and we have a shock to NH. I want to first just look at fix this a little bit. This also, considering the comment here, we call this the y. That's long name is output. I want look first at these impulse responses only with respect to YH. The output response, and following the paper, let's go out 0, so let's go out 13. So we have 1 is the impact. I don't know. By putting the name of a variable after the small symbol command, but before the semicolon command, that tells Dynair to just produce plots, for example, with respect to that variable. To monetary policy shock. And what we want to see, turn off, and go to paper. You double check the parameterization here, but I'm going to see specifically if I can find, they tell us here how they shut off the financial agreement, what assumption they make. first case, we have this baseline where we have that middle model, the first model where we hold this net worth constant. And now we have the alternative. We have an elastic net worth. Right, and this gives us then the picture we have from the lecture and from the book. So this would be here. Okay, fantastic. So what I wanted to look at though, I want to see now if we can get some information about the effects of, say, our shock to net worth, the wealth shock, what that does to consumption of entrepreneurs, but also consumption of our households, who are the ones being taxed for. So let's add in household working more or working less. Let's just look at those four and see if we can maybe come to an assessment of this so-called boost from this wealth tax. Let's first do the baseline where we have inelastic net worth. so this is the result we saw in the lecture, this increase in net worth. This gives us a huge boost in output. Net worth increased by a small amount, and through the financial accelerator, this translated to a large increase in output. This certainly gives us a large boost in the consumption of our entrepreneurs. So, right, if you give them, we have a wealth transfer to entrepreneurs, of course they're going to be better off and be happy, they can consume more. If we have the accelerator effect on, right, they're able to magnify this. Otherwise, a 1% increase in their consumption is now a 2.5% increase in their consumption. Now, the interesting thing that we see here is that our normal, our standard household, but it's not obvious that that they suffered a big loss. I'll think about this in a second. So while they now actually see a small increase in consumption initially, but in the long period term, they suffer a loss in consumption, right? But there's a period in the future where this consumption loss is smaller than the case of inelastic, and they actually have a larger positive consumption, right? So depending on our discount factor, right? This might actually be preferable to this. There's also some more variation, so our intertemporal elasticity substitution is going to play a role. But we see something else in the end. This increase in output is not simply coming through an increase in capital, but because of the complementarity of capital and labor in the production function. Our household, before with the inelasticity of net worth, its labor input only went up by a small 0.2 percentage point, but now we have a very large increase in our household's labor supply. Right? So essentially, we see that our normal household, right, is working a whole lot more. Right? Will this make sense? The net worth boosts investment, boosts capital. Lots more machines, right? We have a positive cross product between the two. So if we increase capital, this is going to increase the marginal product of labor. So we're going to hire more workers. Workers are working a whole lot more, but they're not obviously consuming a whole lot more. So it seems to me that it'd be reasonable to draw the conclusion here that our households are probably our normal households and worker households are a little bit worse off here. Under in the black line is the dotted line. So if we have the multiplier, right? Whereas our entrepreneur households are, remember, they provide labor inelastically with 1, so it's the same either 1. So they're working as much as before. They just now going to consume 2.5 times as much as before. So they're better off. So this. Right, the argument here that we do a small wealth transfer from standard working households to entrepreneur households, and if we also have the net worth, this is going to generate a large output increase. That's true. With this large output increase comes about not merely by capital, through capital, but also through the increase in the labor supply by households, by our standard, our normal working households. Let's try. Well, what happens if our working households actually also supply labor very inelastically? Let's change the elasticity of labor supply by our households. Let's set this to a smaller number. Working household now provides labor less elastically, so it's less inclined to increase its labor supply, or change its labor supply. You have to compensate it more. we did the results here in blue. And what do they tell us? Well, our household is reluctant to supply as much labor as before. The old wage increase, you'd have to offer a higher wage to induce it to work that much more. Because in equilibrium, we're going to end up having a somewhat higher wage and then a somewhat lower labor supply. The increase in the wage because of the elasticity, right, and because of the large increase in the amount of capital, translates to a very large amount of income for our household. You see now a working household, they have, this whole line, the difference, consumption is everywhere higher, and in the largest amount here we're talking about a measure of maybe 0.07 percentage points higher. Right? So our household ends up working a little bit later, more later on. Right? Why? As its consumption is higher relative to what it was before, it's then, right, this changes its willingness, its labor leisure trade-off. We see that the effect on output, like the effect here on labor, is somewhat small. It's a little bit lower at the beginning, a little bit higher later on. But we see now, right, the household is simply not willing to work a whole lot more for a small wage increase. And this in general equilibrium leads to then sort of a transfer of consumption resources back. Right? Our entrepreneur household has to live with lower consumption along the entire path. This goes to fund higher consumption for a working household along the whole path. And it was interesting what I would then do if I'm working on a project and spend a little more time thinking, figure out what's with this inflection point here. Maybe we can add, I want to now think about, remove every figure except for this figure 8. Wage these two. What else to help inform us what's going on here? Let's look at I want the wage. Let's add in the wage going to have to be equal to. We can do this. We are master's students. Let's see if we can output our wage was. So log linearize this. Let's define this as the real wage. And it is equal to CCT over 1 minus HT. So I can write this as WT minus WT HT CT. This means I'll linearize this, replace this with this definition. WH plus HT equals C V C hat T. Using our exponential log approximation. We have the W bar minus WHT bar is equal to C bar. It's easier. Oh, we'll see. So we'll see. Let's cancel out. Those cancel out. Here I also get. So I can write this as W T minus H bar. W hat T plus H hat T equals C bar over W bar. Right, and that is simply equal to 1 minus H bar. Okay, so I have 1 minus H bar W hat T minus H bar plus H bar H hat T equals 1 minus H bar C hat T. So let's see, so I don't want to do more work than I have to. Let's see if we have a steady state labor supply already in here. We have, yes, that's H step. Super. So we can simply write an equation now. One minus H times T plus H times labor variable HH first with our original elasticity. Then okay, so a little extra work. Now I've got another variable. We have our real wage, and indeed we see, right, the real wage has gone up with our more inelastic labor supply. It's higher everywhere. You're wanting us to work more than in equilibrium. Right, than before, you have to give us a higher wage. Right, the spread is larger here than here. Right, so you can see this supply is different. Now the household ends up working initially, even though it's got a higher wage, it's still working less than before. Right, and then later the wage is higher and it's working more than before. See, this happens just like right, this is going to be just the risk-free return. That's probably the moment when our household goes from being, right, when this is a lower than was before to higher. When the return is lower, the household is going to be reducing its savings, or want to reduce its savings. Yeah. And later, when the return is higher, it's a good time to save. So it's going to be increasing its savings. And then it's going to coincide with this, since this is a pivot point here. I got rid of the blue line here. Let's add in Theodore, that's okay, so we have, this here, save this as figure. Alright, so now I can go to MATLAB here. For example, this is where the file should be stored on my drive. There we go. Now I should be able to. Download these and we can put them, say, in a slide or presentation or a paper, a seminar paper. And we have our results for the different parameter experiments that we went through. Okay. Are there any questions about dynamic things you'd like me to show you or talk about with the model? I've tried to go through a couple of different models, change some things, look at different pictures. If there's anything that you're burning to know, Alex, Professor Mayagota, how do we do this, how do we do that? Now would be a good time.
Is there any kind of like standard, like textbook or like just for starting to play around with different kind of big model setup with Daniel or with MATLAB? Because a lot of time when we try to learn it and sometimes the first step feel like bit like too overwhelming.
So there are two two different things. We have MATLAB. MATLAB. MATLAB itself offers online courses, which is really cool. So just look through some of these things, and you what a difference. MATLAB has a very big interest in getting you to learn MATLAB. Why? Because they want you to like MATLAB, and when you're working right at an engineering company or a central bank in 5 years or 10 years, they want you to want MATLAB so that your company pays for MATLAB. Right? So they're thinking, let's get the students good with MATLAB. So they have a lot of really good. There's if you're interested in doing deep learning, machine learning, on MATLAB. Right? There's lots of resources. So really just go on there, online learning is that. Now in terms of Dynair, so there's a good friend of mine, Vinny Mucho, who's in Germany, who has a whole set of where you can do a whole course. What do this?
Used in modern macroeconomics.
Got a spike in the background. Go over the playlist here. So you look at. Alright, so here this is a good one. The Dynair Summer School.
Cộng đồng cản trở của các bạn vừa bắt đầu những chuyện đau ế ẩm. Đau
So he has the whole, there we go, the whole thing you do with the summer school, the Dynair offers on different things that they've done. He has a lot of guides there. But here even simple as like how do I install it? Right, he's going to walk you through it, how to install MATLAB and Dynair, different guides here. Dynair full playlist. So this is probably the one that is the best one. So this is for you.
Hello, this video is part of a series of videos on the baseline real business cycle model.
So he goes to the RBC model, then he looks at the New Keynesian model, so you're going to see lots of overlap of things we've done, and there's just tons of things that he's done in terms of video. So this would be my recommendation, if you want to watch a video. Dynair itself, we have resources, quick start with the Dynair team presentation. So this, yeah, the whole Dynair team, this has a bunch of videos from the Dynair team of things that they would teach in their summer school. Right, so there's a list of different things you can watch here. I would recommend I think some of these are a little bit, one of them is in French, Sébastien Dumont. I love him, but you have a collection of models. We have the macroeconomic model database. Notice it's linked by Dynair with my colleague Volker Wieland, who was here I think a month ago. I don't know if you saw him, heard of him. there's a whole collection of these models that I made available for reproduction. You can.
Hi.
I don't want that much a video of me, right? Where I talk about these different algorithms, and there's a repository on GitHub with lots of all these different models from the literature. That you can look at. So also Johannes Pfeiffer, right, who's always he has a smaller but also a collection of models, and he's put a lot more effort into getting these models to follow dynamic best practices. Right? So that's why he had all these better comments and naming and that sort of and that sort of thing. Oh, he left. But it's on the video. So that's my suggestion. So you can, and the best thing here is to really just to start playing. So maybe what I'll do, let me put together a little document. Model file collections.
Introducing Grammarly, like you've never seen before.
I've seen it all. Just really action videos. It's now a little bit older. There was also a guide that was put together by a number of people under the direction of Thomas Sargent, who has all the money, but he does have one more Nobel Prize than I have. So, he's using this, and then he gives a suggestion. He's a little bit older, but there's also a good guide, and it's linked to Dynair code. Alright, so you got a list of stuff there. Any other questions or things you want to take a look at? Then, tomorrow we'll look at the problem set and the exam. And I think the plan is then to go to lunch together. I'm excited. And then I'll have to go. I'll be back next year, but you won't be here next year. Right? Or I will be, right? So you'll be, so this is, you're in your second year, and you were telling me this last week, so when you start with your, because you might still be around here working on your master's thesis, right? That's where you might be now. Oh,
It's
it stopped raining,
Yeah.
so.